Hello, everyone, and welcome to Global Communication 1. This is the makeup lecture for the Easter class that we're missing. I hope everyone is enjoying the long weekend. Today, rather than go into the next part of the textbook where we look at advertising, I've decided to do something a little bit different today because it is a makeup lecture and there is a quiz at the end of this. So rather than talk about advertising, which was the topic that we were looking at before, let's take a look at a particular writing skill. Usually once a semester, I like to take a class and get students to write an email because as a professor, I receive many emails from students, and I think it's quite obvious that many young people still need a primer in how to write an effective email, especially a formal email in English to a professor or a potential employer. So for today's class, I'm going to focus on this particular writing skill, and that is writing a formal email. I will first talk about some basic principles to remember. Then I will talk about the actual email itself, what to write and how to write it. And I will also give you some tips on some things to avoid. Okay, so let's get started. Just a moment. All right. So first of all, there are many reasons why students might have to send an email to a professor. Uh, this is especially true if the professor, for some reason, is not answering their text message. Or if you're sending a text message to a professor, but you're sending them a personal message and not in the group chat. Sometimes there is a class-related issue, that they can't hand in their homework on time or an assignment. Perhaps they're looking for a letter of recommendation. They want to go to graduate school. In other cases, students need to miss class for some reason, whether it's for a festival or some kind of out of class obligation, doctor's appointment, military related issue, or something like that. Maybe the student has some information or has a question about the course itself, especially at the beginning of the semester. And maybe that information is not in the syllabus, so you want to contact the professor. Or in other cases, you might just want to say thank you in those rare occasions where students want to express appreciation for their professor. Okay, now, as someone who has received many emails from different students over the years and has also talked to coworkers about the emails that they've received, there are some common complaints that I have and a lot of other professors have about the emails that they receive from students. First of all, they look at the email and they say, there's no name. The student doesn't identify who they are. Or the student might say their name, but they don't say what class they are in, Global Communication 1, Global Communication 2, Critical Thinking through English Composition, something else. Or if they do mention the class, they might not mention the section number. Remember, professors often teach multiple sections of the same course. Professors will often have upwards of 120 students, and some of these students have almost identical names. So in that case, it's very important that students not only mention the course that they are in, but also the section number. That helps us understand who the student is. If the student does identify who they are, sometimes the student doesn't clearly write what they want, when they need something. So it's very important to get to the point. It's also a very good idea to keep the language simple, concrete, and concise. Try to stay focused, and whatever you do, don't use Naver Translate. Last of all, one thing that sometimes irks professors is when students use too casual a tone or too informal a tone. Sending an emoji, for example, to a professor is never a good idea. All right, so let's take a look. Before I talk about the different parts of an email, first I'd like to say something very brief about the student's email address and also doing due diligence before you actually send an email. After that, I'll talk about all the different parts of an email and how you can write them effectively. The subject line, salutation, title, the name, the opening, your self-introduction, the body of the email, the closing and the sign-off, and also putting it all together. And last of all, the follow-up. So first of all, if you are going to send an email to a professor, school emails are always the best. But if you do send an email to your professor from a personal account, here are a couple of things that are you should keep in mind. An email address with your name included, it's preferable. An email address that has an unusual name. By the way, this is not just for professors. After you graduate from university and you send your resume to different companies, if you are submitting your resume and the hiring manager sees that the email address is funkygirlyeah@naver.com, that is the sort of thing, it's very slight. And I would like to say that it won't make any difference to a hiring manager looking at emails or looking at resumes. But sometimes it's small things like that that make the difference between someone who gets a job interview and someone who doesn't. So it's always best to have a simple, professional sounding email address. Speaking of a simple email address, if I look at this particular one here, qkrcjftn2001@gmail.com, this sort of email address is not acceptable, and I'll tell you why. This is especially true if you're sending it to a foreign company or a person who might not be familiar with Korean, but the email address looks like letter cereal or letter spaghetti. It's just random letters thrown together. Now, what you probably notice from looking at this email address is that what the student has done is taken their Korean name. I think in this case it's Park and then Park Chol-soo 2001@gmail.com. And they've just written the English letters that correspond to the Hangul on the keyboard. Now, this is one of those small things that just makes an email address not look professional. So if you are going to send an email, this is actually more applicable to sending a resume to a foreign company, international company, if you're looking for a job, maybe more than a professor. But something to keep in mind, if you're going to send an email, especially if you're looking for a job, keep it short, simple, and professional looking. So funny email addresses or ones that look like random letters thrown together, those don't create a good impression. And that's especially true when you're looking for a job. So you've got your email address and you're going to send an email to your professor. Before you send an email to a professor, make sure that you're not wasting the professor's time. Now, what do I mean by wasting the professor's time? It's quite common for students not to look through the syllabus before they send an email. And professors can be quite busy answering other emails, preparing for classes, grading exams, etc. So before you send an email, ask yourself, did I check the syllabus or the Kangwi Guihwekson? It's a very good idea to check the syllabus because the professor spends time preparing it and it's uploaded to Saint. And a lot of the information that you might be looking for, especially if you want to know something about grading or a rubric, something related to the course, maybe the schedule or what material is going to be covered, how many assignments, all that sort of thing is listed in the syllabus. So before you send the email, try and see if you can get this information from another source like the syllabus. Is it already available? It might actually save you a little bit of time. Okay, so now you have a great email address and the information that you're looking for is not in the syllabus, so you're going to write an email to your professor. The first thing you need to do is write a subject line. It's important that you don't forget to write one. I would like to say that all students remember to write a subject line, but the fact is sometimes students are busy and they just quickly write an email to the professor, and the subject line is sometimes either incomplete or unclear. So try and remember to keep it short, put the most important words at the beginning of the subject line, use key words. Those are simple words that are very important to your message, and try to avoid any vague or overly wordy statements. Here are some subject lines that you would definitely want to avoid, and I'll explain why. Number one, I need your help. Okay, well, that's fairly obvious. You're sending an email to the professor, you probably need help, but it's too vague. Do you have a minute? I've received this email subject line quite often where the student just says re. Re means regarding. However, RE, capital RE, full colon after that, is used when you are responding to a previous email. It's a topic that you and the person have already discussed, and so you are referencing that particular topic. If you're sending an email to a professor about something for the first time, don't use re. Try to avoid overly wordy subject lines too. For example, I have a question about the feedback on the assignment from last month. Information like that you would actually put in the body of the essay, not the subject line. And the last example here, hey, prof, I'm going to miss this Thursday's class, okay? Something like this is obviously inappropriate because the tone is too informal, as well as the information itself should be in the body of the email. Okay, let's take a look at some subject line examples that I really think you should follow. Okay, at the beginning of the semester and before the beginning of the semester, professors often get registration requests. The class is full and the students want to know if the professor can sign them into the course. If you are sending a registration request to a professor, then the subject line should simply say registration request. Those are the keywords, registration request, and then put in the course number and the section number. Remember, like I said before, professors often teach multiple sections of the same course. That means that unless you state exactly which section you want to register for, a professor might not know. I'm teaching 4 different sections of Global Communication 1. Which section does the student want to register for? Letter of recommendation request. In this case, the keyword is request. I know before I read the email, you're asking for something. Or request for assignment deadline extension. If you cannot submit your homework or your assignment on time, you need an extra day or 2, request for assignment deadline extension. Or if you are sending an email with some kind of doctor's note or other medical documentation because you missed a class, put that in the subject line. If you need to miss class and you're asking for permission, request for permission to miss class. These subject lines are all very short, usually 4 words or so, 4 or 5 words, and they all contain specific words related to the subject you're going to talk about in the body of the essay or the body of the email. Okay, so you've got your subject line all done. Now it's time to get into the email proper. It's a good idea to say dear and then either the person's name or title. This is what we call the salutation when you say dear. Don't worry, it doesn't sound romantic. It's standard just to say dear and then the person's name or preferred title. So you could put professor, doctor, or the person's preferred title. In my case, I just think Mr. is fine. So if you say, dear Mr. Barnard, that's absolutely acceptable for me. Find out how you would like, how your professors would like to be addressed in any email. It's a very good idea if you're sending an email to a female professor to never use Miss, Ms., or Mrs. Avoid gender and marital status if possible, especially the marital status, because Miss means unmarried, Mrs. means married, Ms. is sort of neutral, but in a professional capacity, you are sending an email to a professor, it's better to say doctor or professor, depending on how your professor wants to be addressed. And then finish the salutation with the family name. Don't use the person's first name and absolutely never use the short form of the name. It's also a very good idea to double check the spelling to make sure that you've spelled the professor's name correctly. Trust me, nothing is more annoying for a professor than to have their name misspelled. So let's take a look at a couple of mistakes that you'd like to avoid. You know, hello or hi, professor. Hello or hi, especially hi, that's too informal. I also don't recommend using an exclamation mark at the end. Also, dear Professor Barnard, in my case, my family name is spelled B-A-R-N-A-R-D. So if somebody misspells my name, that can create a bad impression. If you are sending an email to a professor, always double check the spelling of their family name. Dear Professor Steve, this would be incorrect because we cannot mix the title, professor, and the first name. If you just say, Dear Professor Steve, it's just wrong. The same thing with Dear Stephen Professor. First of all, professor has to go first. We can't put it second. And also you wouldn't use the person's first name. Same thing with Dear Barnard Professor. Professor Barnard. This is a mistake that you sometimes get when students are used to writing emails in Korean. They might think Banada Gyosunim, for example. But in English, we need to have the title first and then the family name. Probably the worst thing that you can do when you send an email to a professor, however, is not to include their name at all. If you simply say, Dear Professor, and then write the email, it sounds very impersonal, and the person reading the email will get the impression that you have sent the same email, copy and paste, to several other professors. It sounds quite impolite and very impersonal. So please make sure that you say dear, and then the person's title, professor or doctor, and then their family name. Okay. So after that, let's take a look at some correct ones. Yeah, Dear Mr. Barnard, Dear Professor Kim, Dear Professor Pak Mi-sun, or Dear Dr. Lee. These are all different examples of the salutation plus the person's title and their name. Okay, so you have your subject line all done, and you've done your salutation, and you have the person's name and title. Now you want to actually say the email. You actually want to start writing the email. The third thing you need to do is write a short opening or nicety. Before people get down to business in their email, it's quite common and generally speaking, good manners, polite etiquette, to include a short statement that extends a warm feeling to the reader. Like, I hope you're enjoying the weather today. I hope you had a relaxing weekend. It doesn't really matter what you say. What you say is not really that important, but it is standard etiquette to say something as an opening before you get to the business part of the email. Now, professors like it when you see them as people as well. Okay, after your opening, now it's a good idea to go into the real introduction of the email. You could state your name, but you don't have to because you're going to write your name at the end of the email. But it is a good idea to state the course and the section number that you're taking. I mentioned this before, and I'll say it again. Professors often have more than 120 students, and a lot of these students have similar sounding names. We can't remember everyone. So it's a very good idea to say, hello, I'm taking your Tuesday and Thursday or Wednesday and Friday class, at 12 o'clock, section 22. And that helps the professor remember not only who you are, but what class you're taking and what time that class is. So you might have something like, I'm in your Global Communication 1, Section 5 class on Wednesdays and Fridays from 12 o'clock to 1:15, or my name is Kim Jong-mi, have your student number there in brackets, and I'm taking your Global Communication 1, Section 3 class on Tuesday and Thursdays from 9 o'clock to 10:30, something like that. As I mentioned before, you don't have to include your name in the beginning because your name also comes at the end. You can if you want, but at the very least, make sure you tell the professor the course, the section number, and when you actually attend that class. That will help the professor remember who you are. Okay, it gives a little bit of context. Now we get into the body of the email. So, like I mentioned before, professors can be quite busy. Please don't write a novel length email. Keep it short and get to the point. If there are any specific dates or deadlines that you need to talk about, include those. Also, don't write a new sentence on a new line. I've noticed a lot of students do this when they write emails. They'll write a sentence, period, and then press enter. And it looks more like a poem than an email in that case. It's better just to write your email in short paragraph form. Avoid giving excuses or making demands. Professors don't need to hear excuses, and we're very sensitive to the idea of students making some kind of demand, like expecting something. It's also a good idea to avoid inappropriate, personal, and non-related information. If your email is about missing class because of a problem you have with your family, try and keep that information to a minimum because it's really not the professor's business. Before you send the email to your professor, it's a good idea to read it and imagine it from your professor's perspective. Is it short, clear? Is it concise? Would it make sense to somebody reading it? Okay, so a few things to avoid. Digressions. A digression is when you go off the topic. Remember, an email should be short and focused. So each sentence should be related to the previous one. Don't go off on a tangent and include non-related information. Emails to professors and employers and potential employers should also not include idioms, slang, or a tone that is too casual. Remember, the professor or a potential employer is not your friend, and it's important to sound professional when you're writing. The next one is not important for me, but it might be important for some professors, and that's to avoid contractions and abbreviations. This really doesn't concern me, but there are some professors who are quite strict about how they like to have emails written, and things like can't rather than cannot, or don't rather than do not, or STN rather than station. You know, some people don't like abbreviations. Emojis, definitely don't include those. And if there's any vocabulary or grammar that you are not sure about, it is a very bad idea to include that. An email to your professor is not a time to practice vocabulary and grammar that you are not 100% sure of the meaning, because it can cause some very unfortunate misunderstandings. I could give you some examples from my own experience in that case. Things to avoid. So here are a few examples. Would it be possible to have an extension? My mother's birthday is on Saturday. There's so much left to do. Trying to choose a good present for her is so hard. Could I have an extra day to complete the paper? Okay, this email has way too much information. The student is asking for an extension, although they didn't mention what assignment it is, but telling the professor about your mother's birthday and all the things that you have to do and all that, this is really beyond what the professor needs to know. You're asking for an extension. Could I have an extra day? That's all you need to say. I'm going to be late to class this Thursday. Yeah, that's too informal. Don't use slang like gonna. Please let me know if this is okay. Yeah, once again, using something like PLS as a short form for please. That's something that people will use in text messages, and it can be done between friends, but it doesn't have a formal tone. And any email that you send to either a professor or an employer or a potential employer, I would definitely recommend that you don't use contractions, slang, and abbreviations like please, like that PLS. This last one is great. Please give me more time to finish the assignment. I'm so busy with homework and other classes. A demand like this is going to create a very bad misunderstanding with your professor. They might feel quite annoyed that you feel your other classes are more important than theirs. It's probably a good idea to avoid referencing work that you have to do in other courses at school. If you need more time, ask politely, don't demand, and don't make excuses. Okay, so here are a couple of examples of ways that you could ask. I was wondering if we could set up an appointment to discuss my grade on assignment 1. Please let me know if you can meet next week. Okay, this is nice, it's polite, it gets right to the point. Okay, you want to see the professor, you want to discuss the grade, perfect. I have to miss class this Thursday due to a physical exam. If I provide documentation, could I be officially excused? Short, clear, concise. Excellent. I will be unable to complete assignment 4 by the due date. Would it be possible to receive an extension? In all of these 3 examples, we don't have any more information than we need. You're just giving the professor the request and just enough information so that they understand what you need. Nothing else is necessary. Okay, moving on. So you have finished writing your message, you're almost done. It's now time for the closing or the sign off of the email. Just thank them for their time and sign off with sincerely, regards, best regards, or a similar expression followed by your name. So thank you for your time and have a great day. Sincerely, Chao Su Li. Something like that finishes the email in a very polite way. Okay, now let's take a look at a sample email from a student and see how well they did. So we have the subject line at the very top, permission to miss class Friday, October 25th. Great, I know exactly what the student is contacting me for. They need to miss class, and I know when they're going to miss class, Friday, October the 25th. Dear Professor Lee, okay, so we have the salutation, we have the title and the professor's family name. I hope you are doing well. Okay, there's a nice opening or nicety. I am in your TLDR 13 class on Fridays from 12 o'clock to 1:15. I have to miss class this Friday due to a doctor's appointment. Okay, that's what the student is requesting. Unfortunately, it can't be rescheduled. If I provide documentation, may I be excused from this Friday's class? Okay, the request is right there. It's clear, it's concise, and nothing more needs to be said. Thank you for taking the time to read and respond to my request. Sincerely. Then we have the student's name and then their student number, which is great because now I can actually find the student very easily on the attendance list. All right, let's take a look at another example here. Dear Dr. Toswell, my name is Jez D.A. and I'm in section 1 of your Old English course on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. After looking over the syllabus last night, aha, they checked the syllabus, extra points. After looking over the syllabus last night, I noticed that the deadline for our final essay is listed as March 7th, which is a Monday. However, in class, the deadline was noted as being Thursday, March 10th. I don't mean to bother you, but I wanted to verify the correct deadline so that I can appropriately organize my schedule and turn in my assignment on time. Thank you so much for your time and patience. And then best regards, Jez D.A. Okay, very nice, very clear, concrete, and concise email. I know exactly what the student needs, and it's clear that the student has done their due diligence. They've looked at the syllabus, and they just want to clarify some information. Good. Okay, part 8, the follow-up. Sometimes, even if you write a really great email to a professor, perhaps they get busy and forget it, or something comes up, but a few days pass, and you still don't have a response from the professor. You might want to contact them again. When you do, it's a good idea to mention that you sent the email, but that you are still waiting for clarification. Whatever you do, don't try and write something like, I sent you an email, but you didn't answer. The wording is very important. You don't want to sound demanding. Even though the professor didn't answer your email, or your employer or your potential employer, please be as polite as possible if you have to send a second email if they don't answer the first one. Polite tone is very important. Okay, now let's take a look at a few examples that you should definitely try to not follow. These are email examples that do pretty much everything wrong. If your email looks anything like this, then you need to start again. So the subject line, missing class from Cartman Rules, with a Z, 99 at yahoo.com. Hey. Okay, right away, this student has made a big mistake. We don't know who the professor is. We don't, the salutation is far too casual. Never say hey as an opening. Okay. Hey, I'm in your class this semester, but have missed the first 4 days due they've misspelled due to some unexpected problems with work and family. They misspelled family and they've got a sad face. I would like to make up the work if you can send me the syllabus and all the handouts. Please remind me if I have missed any important info. Will we be needing the book this semester because I don't have a lot of money right now? LOL. Later, Sunny. Okay, if a student sent me an email like this or anything similar to this, even if half of the errors were still in the email, I would be very inclined to let that student fail. And I'll explain why. If you have missed a significant amount of school, or if there is some significant problem with your employer, a person that there's a formal relationship with, it's very important to be polite. And things like tone and spelling are extremely important, because if you create a bad impression, or if you worsen an already bad impression, you're already standing on the edge. You're asking for extra understanding, some kind of help. You need to show that you deserve it. If a professor received an email like this, I think most professors would say, I don't want to help the student. I don't want to have them in my class. If the student has not only missed the first several days and they send an email that is full of spelling mistakes and informal tone, doesn't seem to be taking the initiative, could you please send me the syllabus? No initiative, no independent action, making an excuse, asking questions like, will we be needing the book? I don't have a lot of money, bringing in personal problems. I think in most cases, the professor would say, you know what? I'm justified in letting the student go, and I'm going to let them go. So if you are in a situation where you're already in trouble with a professor or employer, be extremely careful with your spelling, with your tone, how formal you are when you write, and how polite you are, and especially things like using short form, slang, idioms, and emojis. They have no place in a formal email. Okay, now the information that I have used in this lecture is not all mine. I did look at a number of different sources, a number of different online sources in order to put together this PowerPoint presentation. So if you would like some more information on how to write a formal email, feel free to check out any of the links that I've put here, and you'll be able to get as much information as you need to help you write formal emails to potential employers, professors, any formal correspondence. And this should help you avoid some of the mistakes that young people commonly make when they write this sort of thing. Okay, now the lecture is just about over. It's now time for a quiz. I'm not going to give you an email related quiz, however. You might remember from our last class, I mentioned that I was going to give you a quiz based on the summary and personal response section of the textbook. I believe it was on page 72. Let me check the textbook, page 72, I think. And there was the summary and personal response for the reading Cars That Think. And the first paragraph is a summary. It starts with the main idea of the reading, and then it has the other supporting ideas and a couple of examples in the paragraph. Try and think of a summary as a compressed version of the original. If you have 1,000-word reading, then the summary should be about 250 words. So you should compress it by about 75%. You got 1,000-word reading, your summary should only be about 250 words. Not only that, but there are a few other things to remember. When you write a summary, don't quote something from the article. This is your chance to paraphrase or write in your own words the information from the article, but don't quote any sentences or parts of sentences from the article. Direct quotes do not belong in a summary. Also, if you simply take the key sentences from the original reading and then you write them word for word, that is not a summary, that is plagiarism. You're taking someone else's writing and you're trying to pass it off as your own. A summary should be you paraphrasing the main idea and the supporting ideas of that article. So read the article, find the main idea, the supporting ideas, a couple of key examples, and then rewrite the sentences in your own words. And that's key, in your own words. If you copy word for word from the book, then that's not a summary, that's plagiarism. So keep that in mind. The second paragraph in the summary and personal response was the personal response. And your personal response should mention specific ideas or examples from the reading. So if the reading is on driverless cars, tell me what surprised you or what shocked you about the reading. Are there any ideas that you strongly agree with or disagree with? And mention those parts. Don't just talk about the subject in general. A response is a response, meaning you have to actually mention some actual ideas from the reading itself. That shows that you have read the article and you understand it. Okay. Anyway, if you go to Cyber Campus, I've uploaded the quiz there. It's 5 points. And let me just quickly show you what it looks like. So hold on just a moment. Okay, so here we go. All right, so if you go onto Cyber Campus, you'll find this short quiz. So at the very top, it says Global Communication 1, quiz number 1, 5 points. Put your name, student number in here. If you don't want to complete the MS or the Microsoft Word file, if you want, you don't actually need to use this file. You could just upload the answers in the text box on Cyber Campus assignments. That would be fine. You can upload the MS Word file if you want, if you've completed it, but you don't have to. If you just put the answers into the comment box on Cyber Campus assignments, that's also fine. So we've got your name, student number. Before you answer the questions, read Eating with Our Eyes on pages 38 and 39. This is a reading about food pictures. Lots of people like to take photographs of their food and then upload those pictures to social media like Instagram. That's the topic of this particular reading. So read that and then answer the following questions. The first question is just 1 point. In your own words, what is the main idea of the article? Question number 2, summarize the second part of the article. I think it's 3 paragraphs long. The tastiest food photos. And I'd like you to summarize that second part of the article in about 4 to 5 sentences. Do that, and we're looking at 2 points. And then the third question here asks for personal response. Write a personal response to the article, about 6 to 8 sentences long, and be sure to include references to specific ideas in the article. So tell me what you liked or what you didn't like, what you agree with, what you disagree with. Was there anything that surprised you? Something like that. Okay, so I am just about at the end of today's lecture. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found the information about writing emails informative and useful, and I'll see everybody next week. Enjoy the long weekend. If you have any questions, just post them in Cacao Work and I'll answer your question as soon as I see it. All right, thank you very much.